Whether you remember him as the powerhouse drummer in Genesis, the pop star juggernaut of the 1980s, or the guy who sang You'll Be in My Heart for Disney's Tarzan soundtrack. You'll be in my heart. Phil Collins is a man who has withstood the test of time. I've covered this guy on my channel many times, and though he is a hero of mine, I've been quick to point out his shortcomings in these last 10 years or so as he tries to keep performing despite his diminished abilities. Well, tonight I'd like to harken back to an incident that happened smack dab in the middle of the 1980s during a music festival called Live Aid. The peak of Phil Collins' solo success coincided with this music festival, which resulted in Phil Collins playing drums for the reunion of all reunions, a little band called Led Zeppelin. What started out as a simple idea between Robert Plant and Phil Collins turned into an unofficial Led Zeppelin reunion, a reunion that Phil apparently burned to the ground single-handedly. But did he though? Stick around as we dive into the whole Led Zeppelin reunion debacle. This is Dancing with Ghosts. Live Aid was one of the various benefit concerts held during the 1980s to raise awareness about the poverty and suffering in Africa, specifically Ethiopia. But honestly, all of these kinds of initiatives were the cause du jour of the 1980s. Charity songs and benefit concerts for the salvation of Africa were fashionable at this time, and you definitely weren't sitting at the kids' table unless you were helping out the Dark Continent by loosening those purse strings and donating them greenbacks. As a result, many of the pop stars of that time stepped out of their lingering Studio 54 drug haze to try and make a difference. And Live Aid in 1985 was a choice cut of the up-and-coming pop acts paired right along with the established legacy acts of yesteryear. You had Spandau Ballet rubbing shoulders with Black Sabbath, U2 and Judas Priest, Phil Collins, and pretty much everybody. Though perhaps just a minor exaggeration, Phil Collins was white hot in 1985, and since he was an accomplished musician on top of being a pop vocalist, he was in high demand. Concert organizer Bob Geldof, the actor who dutifully portrayed the character Pink in Pink Floyd's The Wall, was the main man greasing the wheels, pulling all of the personalities together over two continents for a simulcast concert extravaganza. Bob Geldof is a very convincing man, apparently, because this was the same man who organized Live 8 in 2005 and got the original members of Pink Floyd to reunite for one final time. Sans Syd Barrett, of course. Phil Collins agreed to kick something around with his old buddy Robert Plant, who at this point had gone solo and had commissioned Phil to sit in on the drums for various live shows. But let's hear it from the man himself, shall we?
Then Robert says, "You, me and Jimmy could do something." To me, this suggestion seems A, casual, and B, reasonable. I'm busy all over the place. I've been performing with everybody, plugged into projects with Robert and Eric, and even Adamant. I produced and drummed on his single Puss in Boots from his 1983 album Strip. So even if I am already playing under my own steam, I can do something else too. Why not?
But what started out as a couple of mates just jamming out a few numbers quickly turned into...
Harvey Goldsmith and Bill Graham have got involved. You, me and Jimmy may be doing something together has become the second coming of history's greatest rock band. This is a development of which I am blissfully ignorant. Robert hasn't called, so I don't know that John Paul Jones is coming too. And all of a sudden, it's Led Zeppelin. Just to add to the drama, there has also been another parallel conversation. Someone asks, "It would be great if you could do something else at Live Aid, Phil. Any thoughts?" "Well, really, I'd prefer to just play drums with someone," is my honest reply. Then the plotting begins. Goldsmith goes away, looks at the logistics, and announces to Tony Smith, "It is possible, if Phil takes Concorde, that he can get to Philadelphia before the show ends. He can do his thing with Sting at Wembley, fly over to America, and finish the day on stage with Eric and with Robert."
Things only escalate from here when not only is this turning into a Led Zeppelin reunion, but it's no longer a casual affair.
I finally hear that Robert and Jimmy want to rehearse. Rehearsing is the last thing I want to do, especially as that would need to happen in America. I've just come off that 2-month tour, and I want to spend some time this summer with my kids. Anyway, I know these songs. I saw Zepp's first gig. I'm a fan. I later find out that they've also asked former Chic drummer Tony Thompson to play. But Robert still wants me on board. I wonder if it's because he doesn't want to let me down as a mate, or has Goldsmith sold him on the gimmick of me doing both shows? I don't know. I never ask. But I do know I still don't want to rehearse, even though I can totally understand why, with so much at stake, Robert might want to have a bit of a run-through. Perhaps I might have thought differently if I hadn't underestimated the Led Zeppelin reunion juggernaut.
Around the same time, Phil also commits to helping Sting out during his Live Aid performance, since Sting had lent vocals on Phil Collins' No Jacket Required album. So now, Phil is in a bit of a dilemma. Not only has he committed to playing with Sting at Wembley Stadium in England, doing not only his own solo material, but also Sting's solo material, but he's also gotten dragged into playing with Eric Clapton in the States at Philadelphia's JFK Arena. Phil was also good friends with Eric Clapton. Along with doing more solo material in the States, and then finally being the backup drummer to the lauded Led Zeppelin's Second Coming. And through the words of the man himself, Mr. Phil Collins, we get a first-person perspective on how the dynamics changed with Mr. Robert Plant sinking back into the dark cloud of Led Zeppelin.
Here's how it is. Robert on his own, a lovely bloke. Robert and anything to do with Zeppelin, a strange chemistry happens. It's like a nasty strain of alchemy. Everything becomes very dark, sulphurous even. It's immediately obvious that Jimmy is, shall we say, edgy, jumpy. But that fun is all in front of us. Right now, I'm introduced to John Paul Jones, who's quieter than a church mouse. Then I'm introduced to Tony Thompson. He's very cool with me, but not in a cool way. I mentioned to him the pitfalls of playing with two drummers. I've done it for years with Genesis and my own band, and know full well how badly it can go awry. The secret I've learned through hard experience is to keep it simple. But the look from Tony suggests he's not interested in tips from any ocean-hopping carpetbagger who's just swanned in off Concord. It slowly dawns on me. These guys have been working pretty hard in preparation for Live Aid, and Tony's been rehearsing with them for at least a week. It's a big deal for all parties, except this party, who, perhaps naively, has not quite grasped how much is riding on this performance.
Phil is met with a not-so-welcoming presence by the surviving members of a now very brooding Led Zeppelin, and the drama continues.
Then Jimmy looks at me. "So," he says, part drawl, part growl, "you know what we're playing?" Yeah. The only bit I'm still a bit green with is the flamenco guitar part before the solo on Stairway to Heaven. "Well, what is it then?" "Well, I think it's this." "No, it's not," smirks Mr. Page. I'm thinking, okay, well, be helpful. Don't tell me what it isn't, tell me what it is. I feel like I failed a test. What I think Jim is actually saying is, do we really need this guy? Do we really need him to be playing with us? I'm made to feel like the guy whose gate crashed the party. I'm looking at Robert and wondering, have you told him? Have you told anyone why I'm here? I'm here because you asked me to get you on this fucking gig, and then you said maybe you, me and Jimmy can do something. That's why I'm here. I didn't come here to play with Led Zeppelin. I came here to play with a friend of mine who's morphed back into the lead singer of Led Zeppelin, a very different animal from the one who invited me. With regards to Robert's vocals, you have to be match fit, especially if you're doing what he's doing, all this high-range stuff. But it's clear to me that he is not match fit. Then there's this other undercurrent from Page. Yes, I was Robert's drummer, and I've played with him on the road. But this isn't the same. This is Zeppelin. You don't fuck with Zeppelin. Now I'm caught up in the ceaselessly toxic, dysfunctional web of Led Zeppelin interpersonal relationships, ongoing to this day. But I have no option but to shrug off the doubts and get on with it. I know the wheels are falling off from early on in the set.
Lonely, 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 lonely child.
I can't hear Robert clearly from where I'm sat, but I can hear enough to know that he's not on top of his game. Ditto Jimmy. I don't remember playing rock and roll, but obviously I did. But I do remember an awful lot of time where I can hear what Robert decries as knitting, fancy drumming. And if you can find the footage, the Zeppelin camp have done their best to scrub it from the history books. You can see me miming, playing the air, getting out of the way lest there be a train wreck. If I'd known it was going to be a two-drummer band, I would have removed myself from the proceedings long before I got anywhere near Philadelphia. On stage, I don't take my eyes off Tony Thompson. I'm glued to him. I'm having to follow. He's taking the heavy-handed lead and has opted to ignore all my advice. Putting myself in his shoes, he's probably thinking, this is the beginning of a new career. John Bonham isn't around anymore. They're going to want someone. This could be the start of a Led Zeppelin reunion. And I don't need this English fuck in my way. I'm not judging him, God rest his soul. Thompson was a fantastic drummer. But it was very uncomfortable. And if I could have left that stage, I would have left. Halfway through Stairway, if not earlier. There's one more moment of horror. Backstage, MTV VJ Alan Hunter is waiting to interview Led Zeppelin. The sweat still damp on our brows, the bad taste still ripe in my mouth. We gather outside the caravan of doom. Back in the studio, he's teed up the interview with the words, "On a day for reunions, probably the most anticipated is the Led Zeppelin reunion." Now right here, an interview with the reunited members. Hunter starts asking questions, and it's quickly obvious that nobody is taking him seriously. And Jimmy are being difficult, giving vague, cocky answers to straight questions. John Paul Jones is still quieter than a church. For Hunter, he's live on air, a worldwide audience is waiting with bated breath. And these guys are making him look like an idiot. So I try to come to the rescue by steaming in with some answers. Answers to some questions I'm not really qualified to answer. Hunter's probably getting urgent instructions off camera. "We don't want to talk to Collins." But I'm thinking, what the fuck? Why are Robert and Jimmy being like this? The guy is just asking questions. If that onstage debacle wasn't bad enough, this interview footage is going to be even worse.
Wow. That's some pretty explosive stuff. It's pretty fucking rare, especially nowadays in this whole play nice and toe the party line atmosphere of public relations, to be that drab and complainy right after a performance that everyone was anticipating and for the most part enjoyed. Yet the members of Zeppelin were all being very dismissive and pompous. The Led Zeppelin reunion set consisted of a whole 3 songs, not a long set and not really a large window to really mess things up that much. Even though one of the songs was Stairway to Heaven, which is about 8 minutes in length, the set really, in truth, was about a 4-song set. But this is where I have to editorialize. The set sounded fine. Yes, Robert Plant didn't hit the high notes, but he probably never hit the high notes even back in the day, live. I feel like Robert Plant's vocals were always an amalgamation of studio trickery to make his range sound higher than it really was. But even still, he sounded fine. Jimmy Page sounded a bit sloppy, but overall, fine. And yes, it was a stupid move to have 2 drummers playing a Led Zeppelin set, but even still, Phil's instincts were correct in laying back, and even that sounded fine. This, I feel like, is a case of a bunch of actual talented musicians all being perfectionists and, quite frankly, just being way too hard on themselves. Phil definitely did not deserve any of the blame for whatever was perceived as a poor performance. I mean, good Lord, if they thought that was bad, just wait until the 21st century rolls around when artists would have backing tracks of pre-recorded music and would still somehow manage to fuck it up. At least Zeppelin were 100% live and in the moment. Jeez, I'm starting to sound like Eddie Trunk over here. After the Zeppelin reunion and all the other participation Phil Collins had in Live Aid, he had gained this perception in the media as oversaturating himself and coming off as a show-off. And yes, Phil played multiple shows on multiple continents on the same day. But did anyone ever sit and think that just maybe Phil Collins is a hard worker, someone who is dedicated to his craft, someone who at the time was pretty much sober? Because I can tell you right now, that shit would not have transpired if Phil had been messed up on drugs the whole time. Phil might have had his problems much later in his career, but at this point he was still in tip-top shape and was merely just trying to be a friend to his celebrity cunty countrymen. I think the guys in Led Zeppelin would be kind of miserable to hang out with, quite frankly. The erstwhile interview that I played kind of shows you who you'd rather share a beer with at a pub, and it ain't Robert Plant or Jimmy Page. Phil Collins was a humble bloke who pretty much did the impossible, and to that I salute him. Good on ya, Philly C. You're one of my heroes. And as for the rest of you, I hope you enjoyed watching this. Have a good rest of your night.